Okay, hi folks. Here we are in Unreal 5.5 and we're going to start creating our user interface. We're going to go down to our content drawer, going to right click in nothing, go to user interface, go to widget blueprint, and we're going to create a type of user widget. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it WBP for widget blueprint underscore menu. Once I've got it renamed, I'm going to go ahead and double click it. That is going to open up our widget and it's going to put us into the designer tab of the widget. So if you followed some of my other tutorials before, some of the other ones where we're trying to get things happening really quickly, I just go ahead and throw text in there, or I throw in a progress box or something along that nature. But this time I'm going to try and spend a little bit more time getting it set up so that it scales properly with the screen. So I'm going to go down to panel and I'm going to use a canvas panel to organize my UI. Now, when I go and throw in a button to get started, we're going to see this sort of sunburst in the upper left. This is an anchor that is telling our interface where the button should be placed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this anchor to be a center to align everything in the center of the screen. And my thought with this is as your screen scales or gets smaller, you're always going to be positioning your window, your menu in the center of the screen. So if I now just put my button back to 0, 0, you can see that the upper left-hand corner of my button is snapping to my anchor there. So what I like to do is figure out how big my button is going to be. And I think these buttons are going to be 120 wide and they're going to be 30 high. I like these longer, narrower buttons personally. And then I'm just going to push it back half the amount of the size of my button. So I now have a button that's perfectly centered on the screen. And if I now go and duplicate these, I'm going to be able to create 3 other buttons. And let's actually get them positioned one by one. So this second button is also going to be 120 by 30, but now I'm going to make this one -60, but 50 units down. That's great. I'm going to create another one. And then I'm going to make this one also the -60 back. But now instead of going further down, I'm actually going to move up. And so I'm going to put this at -80. So I've got 3 buttons that are equally spaced. And now I'm going to go ahead and throw some text in here. Just going to put that on top of the buttons. And this text, when I put it in, is snapping to that upper left. So I'm also going to change its anchors to the center. I'm going to leave this as 100 wide, but it is 30 high. Let's go ahead and just put that at 0, 0. You can see the text there. I'm going to change this text. And this first one, I think this is going to be our restart or retry. There we go. So this retry, if I move it a little bit to the left again, and the other way that we can do this is I can also just click on the field and drag left and right. We're pretty familiar with this as a way to move things around. There we go. So I've already looked at this and I know that where I want to place this is -50 because it's 100 wide. And I'm also going to place it -18, so it's not quite perfectly set up. Now, this text is falling behind my button, and I'm having trouble seeing it. So one of the other things that I can do is I can push it forward in the Z order, which is going to put it in front of my button. Okay? All right. The other thing here, though, is, and when we get into the other buttons, we'll see this a little bit better. We want to also justify the word in our text box to the center. It's moved over just slightly, but now it should be more perfectly centered. All right, let's duplicate our text. Let's change this one. This will be our play button. And I'm going to move this one up to, let's see, -50 and -83 puts it just about smack in the middle of that button. Let's duplicate one more. This one is going to be our quit button. There we go. And that's also going to be -50, but now it's going to be 48. Okay, so I've got 3 buttons with 3 pieces of text on them. And one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select each piece of this text. I'm going to scroll down to visibility, and I'm going to change this visibility to non-hit testable. What this means is that I won't be able to hit it with my mouse. So that means that I'll actually be able to click through it, and I'll be able to click the button through the text. Now, some of my experiences working in 5.5 is this doesn't seem like it's necessary anymore, but if you're working with an old version, 5.4, 5.3, 5.2, I believe it was always necessary. I know that I've always had to set this visibility to non-hit testable so that it would actually function properly. Okay, our text is set up, our button's set up. The next step here is we should actually rename these buttons so they are more easily understood when we're not looking at the graphics. So button 1 is under the retry, so I'm going to rename this to retry button. This button is behind quit, so I'm going to call this the quit button. And this button is behind play, so I'm going to call this the play button. Okay, each one of these buttons, if you scroll down to the bottom of the details pane, has the ability to have events set for them. We are going to click the plus next to onClicked for play, which will then throw us into the graph editing mode from the designer mode. So I'm going to jump back to designer, and I'm going to do the same thing for the other buttons. So I did play, now I'll do quit. Scroll down to the bottom, I hit that plus, I go back to designer, I go to the retry button, I scroll down, and I hit that plus for onClicked. And now I have 3 events that correlate to each of my 3 buttons. This is also why I like to rename those buttons before I do this, because otherwise this would be saying onClicked button 0, onClicked button 1, etc., and I might not remember which was which. So this is really handy to do this renaming now before you turn on the onClicked functionality. Okay, we're going to do this in order of easiness to code. So I'm going to drag off my quit button, which is the easiest button in the program, and I'm going to say quit game. I need to give it a specific player, and I should be able to drag that out and say get player controller. And now it's going to quit the game when I click that button. This is really handy for when you're building executable files, when you're packaging the game, because otherwise there's no quit button and you have to Alt F4 or Alt Tab out and close the window. We'll see that a little bit later when we get into publishing our games in another video. The retry button is also really easy to program. So we're going to pull this off and we're going to say open level by name, and we're going to leave that blank. Essentially what that's going to do is it's just going to reload the current level. Now, there's a couple of other things that we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth later, but I'm just going to add the functionality for them now. We're going to set input mode to game only. We are also going to need to give it the player controller. So I'm going to get the player controller. There we go. And then we're also going to do something where we say set show mouse cursor. Turn off context sensitive so I can grab that. There we go. And I'm going to check this box so that we're showing mouse cursor. I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into it, but basically what's happening is when you have the menu open and you click something, you're going to need to change the way that the mouse is interacting with the game, and that's what these steps are doing. It's going to be better if I explain this when we actually turn the menu on versus what we're doing right now where we're turning the menu off by clicking these buttons. The play button is going to be a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to come back to this and do this after I have some other things set up. So I'm going to compile this and save. Oh, I forgot the target also needs to be the player controller. There we go. Compile that. Now we're good to go. Save it. So all of these things have set up our menu, but what we now need to do is set up a way that the menu is being turned on. And the way that I'm going to talk about that is using the enhanced input. I'm going to pull this off to the side for a second. I'm going to go down to my content drawer. Now I'm working with the third person template. You can also do this, I should be able to do this with any of the other templates, but first and third person template are where I see a lot of my students doing this. And if you go to your third person or you go to your first person template, there is a blueprints folder where we're used to looking at our third person or our first person character. And I haven't asked any of my students to do this yet. This is going to be the first time they themselves are looking at the input folder. So the input folder has our key maps. And then if I go into actions, these are the basic actions that have been set up. We can look, we can move, and we can jump. And now we're going to add a new action by right-clicking and saying input action. We're going to name this input action underscore menu. And this is going to be the command to open up our menu. I'm going to double click that. And it's opened up over here. So this is what an input action looks like. It's got a name. It's asking, should it be triggered when paused? That's one thing we're going to look at. And what is its trigger? So its trigger, we're going to add, is when something is pressed. That's really all we have to do here is add this trigger, and then it's functional. But I highly recommend trigger when pause should be turned on. What we're going to be doing at some point in this tutorial is we're going to be pausing the game when the menu comes up. And when you pause the game and the menu is up, if this is not checked, Unreal will not receive the input of hitting the menu key. So you'll be locking yourself in the menu. So let's save that. And that's actually all we need to do here. I can go ahead and close IA menu. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our content drawer. Here's all those inputs. Menu is now one of them. I'm going to go back up to third person, go back into inputs, and now we're going to be looking at this IMC. Let's open that up. This is all the mappings for all the commands. We have jump, we have move, we have look. If I look at these, there are keyboard, there are controller, and there are even touch commands which allow you to jump. So spacebar is jump, move is controlled by WSAD or up, down, right, left, or the gamepad. And so this enhanced mapping inputs was added in 5.1. And it's really powerful because previously you used to have to code all of these things separately, and it created a lot more work. So I'm really excited to now just hit plus and be able to add IA menu as a command. And that is going to allow me to add functionality for a gamepad, to add functionality for a mouse button, perhaps, if I wanted a menu on my mouse button, which I definitely don't. Or in this case, we're going to add a key. So I can just hit the keyboard right here, and then I can hit the key that I want to use for my menu. So I'm going to use tab. There we go. If you've watched some of my other videos before, what I always do when I'm just starting out with my builds is I use tab for the menu with the idea that I might be switching that to escape when I actually do my full publish. The reason for this is when you're doing playtesting, escape is what cancels the playtesting, and so I don't like to use escape for that because it conflicts with ending my testing. So tab is what I'm going to be using today. You can go ahead and add a gamepad here if you want. You can just add another trigger here. So if I had a gamepad plugged in, I could hit that key and hit the key on the gamepad to make that work. I'm going to remove that for now because I'm just going to be using tab. Okay. In here, Let's double check that I don't need to add anything else. Just looking back at my notes. Yeah, I think we are all good. We're just going to save this and we're going to close it. Okay, so the next step, we're going to make some changes on the character. So I'm going to go ahead and open the content drawer. I'm going to go back to the third person, or you can go to the first person if that's where you're working, or whatever template you're working with, find your character, double click it, and open it. Okay. Now we're in all the controls. So you can see a lot of these enhanced inputs are already in here. I'm just going to go to the top and I'm going to right click and I'm going to say IA_menu. And I'm going to use this enhanced action event for IA menu. So what's going to now allow us to do is whenever the key for IA menu is triggered, then something's going to happen. And this is really nice because I'm not hard coding a specific key into my character blueprint. The key that controls the menu can be changed in the mappings, and you can also set it up to be configurable by the player. So now that we know that we can call whatever the menu is going to be, we're going to create a new function. So I'm going to say custom event, and I'm going to call this menu call. And I'm doing this because if I have a custom event that I've created, I can call it from other blueprints, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to call for this action events to happen. So by doing this, it allows more functionality. That means I can just pull this off and say menu call. And now every time someone pushes the menu button, the menu call action is happening. Great. So now we're going to program menu call. I'm going to drag off menu call and I'm going to say create widget. Now create widget, this always throws people off in tutorials. Create widget, the second I click this, the node that pops up doesn't say anything about create or widget. So let's just do that again. Create widget is what you want to type in to get the create widget node, which doesn't say anything about creating our widgets. And then we're going to change the class to the class we created for our menu. So that was the widget blueprint of menu. And now this says create widget blueprint menu widget. So it does say create and widget, but until you type those things in, it doesn't say that. All right, so when menu is called, we're going to create this widget. I like to take what this widget is and promote it to a variable. And that variable is what I like to refer to as my main menu, so that I can call that back later. And then we are going to add to Viewport. And I don't like to do this because what happens is that brings the main menu with it, and we don't need that. We can just drag this one into there. Okay, let's compile that, and let's just try this out. So when I press play, I'm in the game, and when I hit tab, my menu shows up. Fabulous. Now, if I hit tab again, the menu doesn't go away, and I actually can't interface with the menu. I'm still controlling the character, so now I just have this awkward menu showing up on top of my character. So I hit escape to stop previewing, and we're going to add a few more things to make our menu actually work. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is after adding to Viewport, and drag this off, we're going to say set input mode, and we're going to set it to game and UI. So we need to have a player controller. Get player controller. And I'm just doing a single player game, so I'm really not worrying too much about which player controller is which. I'm just getting the zero index player controller. This is typical for a lot of my tutorials. I'm not dealing with multiplayer in most of these tutorials. Okay, we need a widget to focus on. So I can't search for my WPB widget here because it's not looking for a class, it's looking for the specific actor in the scene. And that's where, if I drag my main menu in and get it, this variable that I've set over here for main menu is handy, and I can plug that back in. Okay. So now I have the widget and it's being focused on. I'm also going to go ahead and say set show mouse. I might need to turn off context sensitive. Set show mouse cursor. I'm going to set this to positive, affirmative, a yes, a true value by checking that. And the target is also going to need my player controller. Now, if I move this out of the way and I do a test, here I am, I can play the game, I hit tab, and now I have my mouse, and my player is not being controlled by my mouse, but I can still walk around and run with the keyboard while I'm using the mouse on the menu. So we didn't add functionality to the play button yet, so if I click that, nothing happens. But the retry button, if I click that, it starts my level over. And now if I hit tab again, I can double check that the quit button ends my preview. Okay, most of this seems to be working great. I'm going to go ahead and bring my blueprints in one more time. There's a few more things I want to do here though. The main thing that I want to do is I want to add some on-off functionality. So if tab brings my menu up, I would really like it if tab also closed my menu and allowed me to go back to the game. So I'm going to zoom out on my blueprint a little bit. Let's actually just full screen this for a second. I'm going to go back here to where the menu is called, and I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to grab all the stuff that happens after the menu call, and I'm going to drag it off to the side. And I'm going to take that main menu and I'm going to drag it into the scene, and I'm going to say get main menu. Now, this is a really cool command that I was very excited about learning when I first realized it was in the engine. There's something that I can use called convert to validated get. That becomes something that is actually pinned and fires. And essentially what it's saying is get main menu. And is there a main menu? Because what happens here is when I create the widget, I set the variable of main menu. And before this fires, main menu does not exist. So when I do this first menu call for the very first time, it says, hey, what's main menu? And the computer doesn't have a main menu set. So it says, actually, it's not valid yet. So when it's not valid, there is no menu, and I can tell it, when there's no main menu, create the main menu and set the variable to have a main menu. What that also then means is that I know when there's no main menu, and I know when there is a main menu. So if there is already a main menu, that's when this is valid. I'm going to remove from parent. I'm going to remove the menu from the viewport. So what am I going to remove? I'm going to remove main menu. What am I also going to do? I'm also going to set main menu. And I'm going to set it as nothing. So I am making the main menu invalid. So when I call my menu with menu call, if I don't have a menu, it creates one. If I do have a menu, it removes it. We also need to go to the end here and set input mode to game and UI. I need something similar here. So I'm going to say set input mode to game only because I'm going to remove the UI. I'm also going to want to set my mouse cursor to disappear. So I'm going to uncheck that box. To do both of these, I'm going to need this player controller. Let's give that a little more space. Pull that off and get player controller. And then I'm just going to plug that into both of these. So I have one path that turns on the menu and one path that turns it off. Each path sets the input. Each path affects the mouse cursor. Let's compile that. get this out of the way and see if that works. Okay, here we are. I'm controlling my game. I hit tab. I can control the menu. And if I hit tab again, the menu goes away and I can control the character. I hit tab and I can control the player, but I can't control the view with the mouse. Oh, I can control the view with the mouse. Look at that. It's just when I click and move. Fabulous. I hit tab and the menu goes away and the mouse disappears. Okay. This is all looking fabulous. Some people have asked, what if I don't want to control the character in the background? What if I want the game to pause when the main menu comes up? So I can do that by pulling this off, and I can say game pause, set game paused. So when the menu turns on, pause the game, copy that, paste it up here, drag that in, turn pause off, compile. Let's give this a shot. There we go. And now I can hit tab and it pauses the game. And I can also hit tab and it will unpause the game. Fabulous. So if you want to have the game paused, this is the way you do it. If you're having trouble where you're unable to unpause the game, I want to remind you about your content drawer, third person or first person input, and your actions, and the menu, trigger when paused, is turned on. If you're unable to unpause your game, that's the fix right there. Okay, let's stop that simulation. Now, the only thing I haven't gotten working is this play button here. I can turn on and off the menu like this with my tab key, but if you remember at the very beginning in the menu, we did not get set up to have the play button functioning. So in order to have the play button functioning, we really needed in here to have menu call functioning. So I'm going to go back into my widget blueprint menu. I'm going to pull this off and I'm going to cast to third. Let's turn context sensitive back on. Cast to BP third person character. And this is going to be get player character, not controller, but character. And as the third person player character, I'm going to ask for menu call to be called. So when I press that play button, menu call is going to be enacted, which is going to, if the menu is on, which is theoretically it is already on, if I hit play, it is going to call that to happen again. So let's try that. Press play. I'm running around. I've paused. I hit play. And there we go. I can start playing again. Okay. That is the first step of getting our UI tutorial to function. We've created a widget blueprint. It has a design with buttons and text. It has a graph with functionality for our 3 buttons. We have a third person character blueprint, also work for first person, and that's using our enhanced input actions to call menu call, and menu call has the functionality of turning on and off our menu. We also went into the input actions and added a new input action for menu. We also went into the input and looked at the key setups, and we added tab, or we could also add something for the controller. And if I was going to do a build and publish right now and test this, I could change this to escape, or I could even just add another binding and set it to escape. So I'd have functionality for both tab and escape as I was debugging. Okay, let me know if you've got any questions, and I'm going to follow up this video very soon with a second video that is going to look at how to create a title screen that allows you to start the game from the title screen and also gives you a cool background. Hope you'll join me for that video, And I hope you'll think about subscribing and watching some of the other tutorials I have for Unreal 5. Cheers.